All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining today. Like I said, my name is Xander Katsados. I'm Senior Director of Brand Partnerships here at Beeswax, and we're really excited for this conversation today, which is with one of our strategic partners and clients, Chalice. And so I'm going to introduce two folks from Chalice, their CEO, Adam Heimlich, who comes from a long industry history of working at agencies in the digital space, including founding the Horizon Exchange. Adam actually recently testified before Congress and some of the antitrust hearings, which we can talk about a little bit at the end as well. And I'd also like to introduce his co-founder, Ali Manning, who's COO of Chalice. Ali spent the better part of a decade as an executive at both Google and Snapchat. And we're very excited to have them today. We're going to start with about 10 minutes of Chalice going through a few slides sort of on the way that they work and particularly incrementality today in the programmatic space. And then we're going to open it up with a few more folks for a panel at the end. As we go through, feel free on the Q&A tab to ask any questions that you have. We will try to incorporate questions from the group and from the attendees as much as possible. But with that, Adam and Ali, I'll let you guys take it away.
Thanks, Xander. Hold on, there we go. So thanks, Xander, for hosting us. Adam and I are going to present, and then we're also going to bring in Ken, our chief data scientist, and Kimberly, part of our sales team, for the panel. So our agenda for today is to talk about what incrementality is, why it has become a very hot topic in the market right now, the best way to solve for it, and hint, it's custom algorithms, what to expect when you're expecting incremental ad buys, and Q&A, which will include our panel as well as opening it up to you, the audience. So incremental lift is the additive effect of advertising on top of a business. So businesses know that advertising drives additional results. In this case, we're going to talk about sales. But traditionally, advertising takes more credit than it's due. In traditional advertising, that's because you cannot untarget an audience that is going to buy your product anyway. So for example, Procter & Gamble's Bounty paper towels have over 50% of the market share. So when Bounty buys a TV ad or a billboard, they're inevitably going to reach their loyal customer base who would be buying their paper towels anyway, and that incremental ad effect is zero. So that's been generally accepted in offline advertising. And then online advertising came and made this promise of, we're going to make it better because we can target and untarget audiences. But the irony is, as online advertising's machine learning has gotten smarter and smarter, smarter being smarter at getting credit for last touch conversions, it's actually pushed incrementality down, right? So when advertising is pointed to taking credit for last touch, you end up targeting customers with a really high propensity to convert with or without advertising. So the reason incrementality is such a hot topic right now is it is finally possible to deliver incremental results. And that happens by retraining your bidder to focus on incrementality, right? So to not focus on last touch conversions, but actually on getting incremental sales. And that obviously can drive really big results for top line, the top line of a business. The issue is, and the reason why it's a hot topic, but a lot of clients haven't made much progress, is incrementality is typically treated as a measurement problem, which it is, but it is also a media buying problem. And the two need to work together in order to create a closed loop system in which you're solving for incrementality. Right now, it's treated as a lot of stop and go. So you stop to run a measurement study, see what the incremental lift is, try to unpack some factors that are contributing to low or high incrementality. You give those instructions to media buyers. They do their best to put those instructions into the buying platform. You get results, you know, run media, you get those results back. Then you reevaluate how on or off target you were, do the measurement study, and then you go back and run more media buys. So it's not a closed loop. But taking over the algorithm allows you to combine all of that into a real-time solution. So the way we think about this is right now standard media buying algorithms are kind of like an autopilot pointed in the wrong direction. And the media buyers are the pilots fighting against that autopilot. So imagine that you're trying to get to Seattle, but your autopilot is pointed to San Francisco. Now, as a good professional pilot, you might be able to fight against that autopilot and get you to Portland. And that is what the measurement is going to tell you, where you got and how far off the mark you are. But really, to get to where you need to go, you need to rip out that autopilot and replace it with something new, something that will work for you. And all of the DSPs offer that in some fashion, but we really like Beeswax because it offers the most powerful capabilities and flexible capabilities in building that autopilot. I'm going to turn it over to Adam now to talk about the ways measurement can come back together with ad buying.
All right, so the measurement problem is always solved by some sort of experimental design, right? The scientific demands that you be able to compare and isolate an ad in isolation. So you need some sort of control. It could be on-off, sometimes it's geo, sometimes it's PSAs or ghost ads. And the measurement problem is a lot about perfecting these, right? None of these are perfect. But in the media buying problem, that's not as big an issue, right? Because you don't need perfection. What you need to know is, am I pointed towards Seattle right now? Does it help if I increase my altitude, right? You have your hands on a lot of levers, and what you really need is information of what's better than what else for incrementality. So we're going to use a different terminology when we talk about optimizing. Slide. Now we'll talk about ad effects, right? Since the word incrementality is so much associated with the campaign as a whole, that when we talk about individual impressions and signals coming to you in real time to optimize to, we find it's more helpful to talk about the ad effect of a tactic, a line item, or a bid parameter, right? So ad effects is where all the variance is. You'll have different ad effects for every user, for every environment, and for every ad, and for every combination of all of these. So to zoom in on users, here we're looking at a triangle that represents all your reachable audiences with the high propensity to convert ones over on the right. Your last touch algorithm is always going to push toward these users, right? It sees them as very high propensity to convert, a really easy way to get cheap credit, and that's where your autopilot's going to go. The predicted ad effect of these is 0. So a lot of people who are pursuing incrementality have taken as kind of first step of just eliminating these audiences, right? They exclude this from their buy. What happens then is that your algorithm is still trying to get last touch credit just with the next audience next to the black triangle. And that doesn't work so well either. The biggest problem there is that the machine never learns to drive ad effects. So if the machine is trying to learn ad effects, and I'll direct your attention over to the left of this triangle, it's going to try a lot of things to try to move the needle, right? And that's what you want. In these bigger audiences, you want it to try different creatives to different audiences and different combinations on different sites. You want the machine to go through all these and learn who can move the needle, which is something the machine just won't do if it's still looking for last touch credit. All right, so the process of optimizing everything to the ad effect is one example of what a custom algorithm can do. We're talking about today with custom algorithms to incrementality, but pause for a Chalice custom algorithms commercial. We will optimize to all sorts of unusual or combinations of KPIs, right? So we're talking about incremental conversions today, but once you unlock that outcome, we could optimize to all kinds of things. You don't even have to choose just one, right? Incremental conversions combined with lifetime value is a really valuable retail algorithm if you want to figure out to whom and when should you discount as opposed to putting everything on sale all at once. We're also doing really interesting work with persuasion and brand lift, running up to the national elections in the United States in just 20 days. So, but going back to our example, how we do an incrementality algorithm, we run a PSA, or we're increasingly learning to do this in Ghost Ads, so that the machine has the difference between exposed and unexposed. And we create two propensity models. For every user, there's a propensity to convert if exposed, and a propensity to convert if unexposed, and your incremental propensity is the difference between those. So if you're gonna buy bounty paper towels, whether you see an ad or not, your scores are the same, and your incremental ad effect associated with that user is 0, as it should be. And here we're looking at an illustrative example of an incrementality model where we've named some of the model features that pop up. So important to note that an algorithm isn't just one thing, one model. There'll be a model for users. On the right is a model for supply, where we're looking for really effective exposures at a good cost to value ratio. And then another model for exposures. In this example, because the bidder has to make really tough decisions on what, for example, whether it's better to bring one good user from 3 to 4 or one great user from 1 to 2 in frequency, right? Those are really complicated decisions for the machine to make that sometimes may require a separate model just for exposures. So in Beeswax bid models, you can run all these models together and calculate them into the exact bid that's appropriate for every single bid request.
Okay.
So, oh, sorry, back to Allie.
No problem. So once you have that autopilot built for you with a custom algorithm, you need a destination. So you can set it to any destination, you need the destination. So we recommend cost per incremental acquisition. So rip out your CPA and replace it with CPIA, which is an optimization KPI that goes to ad effects. And so advertising to a CPIA can have some pretty powerful business results. We are going to walk through an example of something typical we see in the market. So say you're an advertiser, you have native sales of 100,000 sales a month. So native being would happen with, would happen without advertising. And then you get an advertising budget of $1 million. You want to increase your sales. So, so like we saw earlier, right? You put that advertising into the mix. You see a low incrementality. In this case, it is 20%. So you've increased sales by 20,000 sales. And what that implies is that your cost per incremental acquisition at $1 million with 20,000 incremental sales is $50. Okay, so you decide to switch out to a CPIA, right? So $50 is too high, a $10 CPA is too low, you want to increase your incremental sales. So you take that $1 million budget and optimize it to a $20 CPIA. You can then get 50,000 incremental sales, which is 25% addition to your top line sales for the business. So we also wanted to unpack some of the typical things we see inside of a media buy when you're optimizing to cost per incremental acquisition. So we'll first talk about remarketing. So with remarketing, what we see is that recency becomes a longer window, right? So when someone's going to convert anyway, you can ping them an ad and capture that conversion, while the tab in their browser is still open. It's not really an incremental conversion, but with incremental remarketing, you need a bit of a longer window. Frequency as well. When you're optimizing to last touch, you can do a lot of one and done ads, or you might serve an ad like 20 times because it looks really effective and you can juice up your impressions that way. When you're targeting incremental, you start to really focus in on the middle of that frequency curve. The ads obviously need to be viewable if they're going to have an effect on the person they're served to. And high quality sites tend to command more attention to the ads. So that happens there. Prospecting also looks very different in terms of a media buy once you switch from CPA to CPIA. So the footprint of who you're reaching starts to not overlap with TV as much. You need larger ads that get placed more precisely, usually on undervalued sites. That frequency distribution again starts to go to the mean, and message optimization is really important, right? So now you're prospecting people who aren't going to buy your product anyway. You need to figure out the message that is going to get them to do that. All right, so we'll walk you through a case study. So this is a client who has $10 billion in annual revenues. They're from the travel industry. And they were seeing what a lot of people are seeing in digital advertising today, diminishing returns on their ad spend. So they kept funneling more and more dollars into this remarketing campaign, which is what is happening on the X part of the axis. Then on the Y part of the axis is their total sales volume. So you can see that as they funnel more money into the campaign, they're seeing additional sales, but it's at a pretty flattening curve. Okay. So when they switched out the algorithm to focus on incremental lift, there's an immediate step change in results. This is remarketing, so in that case it happened because they were targeting the other side of the pool who weren't going to become incremental customers unless they saw ads. And then over time, with this incrementality algorithm, there starts to become more smarter optimization. And so for this client, frequency and message optimization were the key factors to creating a steeper return curve, which then allowed the client to do that, pouring more and more budget in and seeing higher returns. All right, so if you've joined us today, you're probably thinking you want to get started. Maybe you have gotten started and run some studies, but you're really interested in closing that loop. So the first thing we recommend is that you estimate a target CPIA. So you could obviously, if you have an incrementality baseline, could look at what it is today and then decide what, based on your business metrics, it should be. You can then run a control or ghost ad, and then construct bid models off of the findings you have from running your test and control. You would then launch, measure, and iterate, right? So it's pretty straightforward in terms of steps. But where we think the magic really is in constructing the bid models. That's why we have Ken, our chief data scientist, and his team, is because the bid modeling is, as Adam said, could be simple, such as like one user model, but can start to get really complex if you want to get better and better, right? So you can add many models in, which then becomes algorithmic. And that is where the data science and media buying, meet. So one of the reasons we created Chalice is because we think most agencies and clients aren't ready to do that yet. Not as a fault of their own, just usually data science and media buying are separate departments. They're usually both understaffed. And so that's why we created Chalice. We are now going to open it up to questions. Back to Xander.
Thank you both so much. That was fantastic. Really excited to have you here today. And just to reiterate, Chalice is a partner and a client of Beeswax. Most of their secret sauce is built off of our bid models technology. And we're excited to get into the panel. So I'm going to introduce two more folks from the Chalice side. First, I'd like to introduce Kimberly Island Johnson from the Amplifier team. And then I'd also like to introduce Kenneth Rona, who is Chalice's Chief Technical Officer and Head of Data Science. Kimberly, I'd actually like to start with you because Amplifier is a company that partners with kind of the latest and greatest in ad tech and digital marketing across the board. And obviously, you, like Beeswax, have chosen to include Chalice in your portfolio. I'd love to hear, first of all, sort of the methodology behind what made Chalice attractive to partner with. But then secondarily, since you have kind of a more macro view, what are you seeing regarding incrementality in the space as a whole?
Hey, Xander. Thank you for having me. So, over the past few years, we've seen many of our clients moving away from last touch CPA, which, essentially incentivizes the wrong type of behavior, just tons of retargeting. we are so excited to have Chalice as a partner because they are addressing that issue. The fact that they are focusing on incrementality and in order to do so, building out custom algorithms, it's something that our clients are asking for, and it's something that our clients absolutely need. I think the industry is at a point where media buyers are really looking to prove out what exactly their display budgets are doing, and Chalice helps them do exactly that.
Sorry, I was on mute there. That makes perfect sense. I guess kind of dovetailing that, Adam, from a historical standpoint, I mean, you've been on the agency side for so long, right? Incrementality is a subject that continues to come up. I feel like it sort of goes in and out of vogue, right? Particularly, as Kimberly mentioned, last touch, multi-touch, etc. How have you seen this evolve over time? And then I guess, as CEO of Chalice, sort of what crystallized in your mind that made you feel like you needed to start this company to solve this problem?
Yeah, there are a few aha moments, but 2017, working at an agency trading desk, our toughest client was pushing us in this direction to drive more incremental conversions. And an early discovery was that was that one ad exposure, the ad effect associated with one ad was 0. So we asked the DSP to help us not show, we'd always end the campaign with a lot of people seeing one ad. So we asked them to help us get frequency up so that we didn't have all this waste of people who only saw one ad. And the only method they had for that was very hard, right? The frequency isn't available in the bid request, right? Current frequency is not available in a bid request. And to make it available, you have to save all your IDs every day, create new audiences from those. It's a cumbersome process. So a big moment for me was when Beeswax launched the augmenter. I realized that we could store current frequency in the augmenter and have it available at bid request. Made me very confident that this is a problem that we'd be able to solve for people who are in the position I was in 2013, to have a client demanding incrementality and having sort of a map to get there, but not the machinery to actually get us to drive there.
That makes sense. I'm going to kind of turn your answer against you a little bit here and bring it to Allie, because a lot of times clients want certain things, right? I talk to brands all day long, but at the same time, you start mentioning things like building out an augmenter, building out a custom piece of technology, and things start to sound difficult, right? Things start to sound a little bit scary. And so, Allie, you've been on the tech side at a number of marquee, now publicly traded companies. I mean, as an operations expert, how do you sort of build that roadmap with clients and make it very digestible so that it's easy to kind of crawl, walk, run to that methodology?
Yeah, for sure. As someone in operations and manages P&Ls, I always say that the juice has to be worth the squeeze. And I think a lot of people have been burned, right, with like, here's the latest and greatest in ad tech and it's going to revolutionize things. Partners overpromise all the time, and then the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. And I think that is kind of particularly an issue in programmatic. That said, we have seen that this really does have a big impact to advertisers, especially those who are very digital forward. And it is like an upfront investment. It does take time. It also sometimes takes education of stakeholders, right? Like, we're going to rip out that $10 CPA and replace it with a $20 CPIA. And they're like, why'd you double the metric, right? And so there's a lot of education that needs to go on. But we've found that, first off, I'll say Ken has built a great infrastructure that really allows it to be turnkey. We like to talk to clients about how Netflix, made an announcement that they had spent $700 million doing this 3 years ago. It's now, because of advances in cloud computing, it's nowhere near that kind of cost. And so it's not turnkey, but it's something we could get something live in 21 days and an algorithm working for you a few weeks after that. A lot of the upfront investment happens really in aligning stakeholders and getting the data right. So, you need a client who's going to be willing to, A, latch on to something that delivers better business results, and B, spend some time and investment in getting that up and running.
Perfect. All right. That's really helpful. I'm actually going to change gears really quickly and bring this to Ken, because we've had a lot of very specific technical asks from the group. Before I do this, I just want to plug Beeswax and kind of the series really quickly. So we do have an upcoming webinar about our single tenant infrastructure and more on incrementality. Actually, Ari Paparo, our CEO, will be giving that next week. So this is kind of a part 1 of 2 parts. But Ken, I've got kind of a big question for you that I'm going to throw you a little bit blind here. And first, you know, because of your pedigree, right, being chief data scientist at Chalice, having a PhD in economics and statistics, and working across the media field, Warner Media, X+1, Ignition One, etc. There's a really interesting question that just came through, and I'm going to paraphrase because it's a little bit long, but effectively it says, programmatic is a space that's suffered from, call it intentional obfuscation, in both service of a narrative that these secret sauces are really complicated to be understood. And so the question is, do custom algorithms become another murky secret sauce that need to be trusted? Or do we feel like custom algorithms really can be a true solution that can be auditable, that can be more transparent? And if so, based on what you've built around the Beeswax bid models tech, sort of how does that happen?
Sure. And so one of the things that I tell people when they say, well, why do you start the company with Adam and Ali? I say, you know, there's alignment of values. And really the first thing that came out was alignment around transparency. And so everything we do, a part of it, you know, especially to the extent that we're using Beeswax for our clients, they have access to their own data, right? That we don't hide we don't hide any of it. They can go on the platform and see what's happening, but they really can't see the model per se. On that, but I said we value transparency, and so one of the things that we've done is the modeling approach is not like, hey, we're going to throw the best possible algorithm at this thing, and to your point, it's a black box. We'll never be able to explain what's happening. It's just kind of trust in the algorithm. I'm very much a trust but verify kind of guy. And so what we've done is we've adopted a methodology that gives you kind of simpler but still fairly sophisticated models that explain exactly what's going on. And you know, I'm an academic by training and have spent 20 years explaining to executives what is happening inside the models, right? And so we kind of know how to do that, right? And so I frankly, I think the current crop of data scientists are really focused a lot on predictive power, right? Accuracy. But if you focus on accuracy, and as to Ali's point about what the model is optimizing to, right? It's going to optimize to the thing you tell it to do mercilessly, but you never understand why. And so what we've done is like the kind of first set of models that we produce for a client show what the drivers of behavior are. And so we just make that available to you, right? And I can kind of say to folks, look, the thing that really drives value for you is targeting on in smart TVs in rural Arkansas is super efficient for you, right? Whatever it is, but I can tell them, right? And then we can kind of have a discussion about how much impact that has and how come that isn't effective in Los Angeles, let's say, right? And so, like I said, the transparency piece has been really critical. And what I hope is that we don't roll out technologies that obfuscate and that, yeah, full stop, I guess. I'll leave it there.
Got it. That's really helpful. Really quickly, just the panelists. We still have a number of people who are logged in and a lot of questions. Are you guys okay to go over a little bit? Great. Adam, I'm going to kick it to you. This is from another attendee. I saw you answered one question in the chat around variables and the survey feedback, kind of as a corollary to that, and also what Ken said, and anybody else can jump in on this, but how are you identifying test and control users? Is this through probabilistic or deterministic modeling? And then how are you getting the data? And then Ken, I don't know if you want to jump in, but how would you action off that as well?
Let me answer generally, and then Ken can answer more specifically. Generally, the Chalice proposition is we work at the limits of what the tech market allows, right? Since we're not a tech company, we don't have to make claims that our tech is better than someone else. Like we just approach the tech market and say, this is what's out there. This is the best that can be done. So that's our answer to all audience questions. Since it's a Beeswax webinar, we'll talk about Beeswax. Their ghost methodology is just being developed, but the test and control stuff we're running right now in Beeswax is off the Beeswax ID or the live ramp IDL. So those are two IDs with that are essentially panels, right? Because cookies are a panel. LiveRamp is essentially a panel that we feel give significant results. And I'll pass to Ken for more detail.
And I think to Adam's point around, like, we're going to create segments that get excluded, right? Beeswax IDs, LiveRamp IDs that get excluded, or, and however that's done, right? Whether it's done regionally or there's actually nice functionality inside Beeswax for creating experiments. And so, once we put someone in a segment that's in a control, they get a PSA and we never touch them again. Or we'll be using the ghost ad methodology, right? Where we won't even have to show a PSA. We'll just kind of track and make sure that user never sees an ad. And so, I think that the world's gotten much better about that. The conflict comes when we're kind of in market with another provider, right? That I don't want to step on someone else, right? And so the important thing to work out with a client is that like what part of the cookie space or the region or the market segment, right, that we're going to address so that we don't step on and they don't step on us, right? That we want clean results.
That makes sense. This is more a storytelling question and then maybe a little bit of a functional question. So it kind of could be anybody who wants to answer who feels like they have a good point of view. But this is asking from the agency side, but in general, and this is something we struggle with at Beeswax too, right? If you're going for a custom KPI, which essentially we are, right? Incremental conversions in this case, how do you educate clients about moving to this model where your overall CPA might actually be a little bit higher, right? And, if that's true or not, then the question is like, how do you incorporate the cost per incremental, conversion, what have you, into a multi-channel campaign rather than not necessarily programmatic or not necessarily into just one aspect?
Yeah, should I take that?
If you want.
So it's not going to be for everyone, but there's a chance we're too early as a company, but I'll tell you the way we see it. Like the way we talk about things in 2017, there were two companies who would have known exactly what we're talking about and were moving that way, and that was Uber and Netflix. Google was maybe in that group too. Now we'd say there's several dozen clients that have come on board since then, and in the conversations that we're having now, we think there's a good 5 to 10% of clients that are actively moving in this direction, which still means the majority is still going to be happy with their CPA. But we think that's enough critical mass that this is a good time for us to be in market and for everybody in the industry to be talking about their clients about this is something to get on, because we think that the ones who do adopt it in this next wave are really going to pull ahead of their competition. We've seen this before, right? When programmatic came out first, even when search came out, once the value offsets the cost, right? If it costs 10% and there's 30% lift, it's only a matter of time till everyone adopts it and it becomes the norm. We think that's the situation here. And if you have a client who's just happy with the way that they're doing things, I would just expect that in 5 years, they're not going to say the same thing. One way or another, they're going to be somewhere else.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I'm going to add on to that the 2 points. One is that I think online advertising has taught us like efficiency. But I've always talked to clients about efficiency and volume as trade-offs, right? And if you want to grow your business, it's probably going to be less efficient. But I think generally businesses want to grow. And so you need a business decision maker who, is accountable to business results and stands by them. The second point I was gonna make is eluding me right now. So that was such a good first point here.
No, I think that's a good place to kind of wrap things a little bit. I know we're a little bit over. I do have one last question for the group, and there are a lot of other questions, and apologies we didn't get to every single question. There's some overlap. We'll try to follow up individually. I think one kind of two overarching questions that are kind of very specific to this conversation. One is, does Chalice work with agencies and brands? I think the answer would be both. It's very use case specific. And then there are some questions around commercials, et cetera, in which case we'd recommend reaching out to the Chalice team directly. What I'll say at kind of the end here that I'd like to ask the group. So Adam and Ali, you are actually living together, right? You started this company from scratch. Ken, you've partnered with Adam and Allie and Kimberly as well. None of you have, well, Adam and Allie are stuck in the same place in Brooklyn day after day during a pandemic. Ken and Kimberly, you haven't actually met them face to face, right? So I guess one question for Adam and Allie, how do you deal with that in this kind of environment? And then Ken and Kimberly, you know, how do you put your faith in people when you haven't actually met them face to face? Do you feel like this is a new paradigm? And I just think it's an interesting conversation. So maybe like a quick final thought from each of you, and then we'll wrap.
Sure, I'll start. I think that, you know, I mean, we are in a remote world right now. So I think with constant communication, it totally works. I mean, my team speaks with Adam, Allie, and Ken at least once a week, sometimes 2 and 3 times a week. So the communication is there. It absolutely works. So, you know, trust is not, it's not an issue. And we're excited to work with them.
I just say it's a good time to do something new and learn new skills and make new friends, right? It's just a tough time, and having a company and working with other people who are trying to do something new has helped.
Yeah, I think Xander, you didn't make it clear that I didn't like move in with Adam to start the business. So we met at work on the very sexy Capital One search account over a decade ago. And it's been fun to be married to my business partner. And like Ken said, I think we all have the same values, but also same sense of humor, which is really important in a pandemic startup mode.
Yeah, and so for me, the critical thing was that because Adam and Allie and I have never met face to face, like right, and so I'm looking forward to the day where we can toast a glass in person. But it was really around, as Allie said, and I guess I started with, was values alignment, right? That we all wanted the same thing, right? We all value transparency in the media. We saw the same problems around how attribution was being credited. You know, we also saw the opportunity, frankly, right? Like seeing that now was a time where the costs to be able to execute this kind of vision are you know, they're not $700 million anymore. You know, we pay fairly nominal rates to our vendors, you know, because it's all software as a service in the cloud. So I think those kind of a number of things came together for us. And, you know, but at the end of it, you know, we talk about each other's kids, like we're involved in each other's personal lives. And I think we've gone out of our way to do that with each other.
Great. Well, thank you all very much. Really quickly, I'd like to quote.
Hey, and on that note, I mean, I trust Xander too, right? And for the same reason, right? So Xander and I, like the 4 of us have kind of sat down and had very kind of personal conversations, and then the business as well. So, you know, really couldn't be more thankful for Xander as kind of our advocate inside Beeswax.
Well, thank you all. This has been a really exciting journey for all of us. I was going to quote Scott Galloway. If you're familiar with him, he's a marketing professor at NYU and serial entrepreneur. But what he said is that there's only one common theme between the companies that he's started and that have been successful and the ones that he hasn't. The ones that he started that haven't, and that's been that they were started during a recession. So I do think that's an interesting inflection point. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, people making moves in the economy right now, and I think you guys are well positioned, but we're excited to move the partnership along. Thank you all for joining. This should be on our YouTube channel. Please dial in next week for our session as well, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hey, everybody.